In today's video, we're going to be creating this beautiful landing page for your SaaS company. We're going to be utilizing the latest technologies such as NEXTJS 13, Tailwind, and we're going to incorporate a few components that you guys can utilize on your everyday projects. So let's get right into it. To get started with our project, we have to install our NEXTJS framework. In order to do that, I do have that pulled up right here actually. And I like to utilize Yarn for it to install that just because it does a better job of compiling that. It's a lot quicker in my opinion. So we're going to do that. We're going to be prompted with a few questions. So to clarify exactly what we want with this specific project. So it's asking us what your project should be named. We're just going to say Saas_app. I think it's fine. Should we use TypeScript? It doesn't really matter. For the sake of this project, we're just going to say yes. I'm sure if you're building out a modern SaaS product, you're more than likely going to be using TypeScript anyways. It's asking us for ESLint. I'll say yes. Would you like the source directory? Just to keep things simple, I think we'll say yes, and we'll say no with the app directory. And we'll stick with the @ to alias to import some stuff. And so now it's going to install all of our dependencies, the React, the types, and the ESLint. Once we get that installed, we just have to cd into our app here, Saas_app. And then we start it up by saying yarn dev. We will then be prompted with this URL. You can just hold Control and then just click on that. And you should just be able to open it right up. There we go. We have our NEXTJS 13 installed onto our file. The next thing we want to do is actually install Tailwind. And in order to install that, let's open up our file here. We'll go into our folder here. You can see we have a bunch of directories. We have our sources. We're going to have our pages. We're going to have our styles or global, which reminds me, we're going to install Tailwind CSS now. And in order to do that, we'll open up our Tailwind documentation over here. And what this documentation tells us is that we have to install a few dependencies first onto the file. We have to go down to where it says this. We go in here. We go back into our terminal. We're going to paste that. I think I already had mine installed, so it should just be a quick installation. Okay, so once that is finished installing, we then copy this where it says tailwind config.js, and we go over to our Tailwind folder that it installed. See, previously I accidentally installed this contents tab for the HTML, but since we're using, again, NEXTJS, we need this to be for a framework specifically. So we're just going to paste that entirely. And so essentially what this is doing is just saying like, hey, under the app directory, which we don't have, the pages, components, and the source, which we do have right here, we're going to make sure that it understands that we want Tailwind inside of that, okay? So we simply Control F and save that. We can exit out of that. We go back to our Tailwind, and then where it says global.css, we copy this right here. We go over to our source, styles, and right here you'll see global.css. You just simply paste that in there. So as you can see, I had already pasted mine in there. Below that, there's going to be, I believe, a home module.css. I just went ahead and deleted that. So if you see that, just delete that. And now we should just have Tailwind installed. So we'll go ahead and run our server once again to see what that looks like. And I'll open up the directory local.host 3000. You'll see it right here. And we might get some errors. And what that is telling us is that because we deleted our CSS portion of the home modules, we have to remove that. So let's go over to our index folder. We'll go ahead and remove this where it says import styles. And it should just fix that off the bat. Okay, and it's also saying that since we have a couple of predefined styles in there, we'll just go ahead and remove all of this too as well. So let's go up to our main, I believe. So we'll go ahead and remove that class as well. And so now we don't get an error. And so now we're working with an empty directory. So that's good, because that means that now we can go ahead and start installing our components. Before we do that, it's always good to rename a lot of these meta tags. It's good for SEO practices. In this case, we're just going to say a SaaS company. And again, these meta tags show up under Google, especially once you redeploy these. So it's always very important for you to rename these. In this case, we're going to rename this. We're just going to say SaaS app. It's going to show up in the directory as well. So you can see right here, when you reload it, it shows up here for SaaS app. Again, not important. If you're trying to make a SaaS product, just name this the title of your company. So it doesn't really matter. Right here, we have a font installed. It's going to be the Enter font. If I'm honest, that's okay. I do like Enter. That is a pretty solid one. Next head, next, all these right here, we're just going to leave those, but we're not going to use them. So now we can go ahead and start installing our components. So to do that, we're going to get out of the source directory, or actually inside of our source directory, we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to name that components. Okay, so we create a new folder. We can exit out of these, by the way. And then inside of the components, we're going to then create a new component, and we're going to name that hero.tsx. Okay. And now we can begin to import a couple of things. All right. So once we created the hero TSX folder, we're going to begin to import a couple of things. So the first thing we need to do is say export function. And we're going to name this, of course, hero, because that is what we're creating here. And then we just have to close those parentheses and then open up with a bracket. And then now we, of course, return it and then open with a couple of the parentheses, I believe. And then inside that is when we're going to begin to create our hero page, okay? So inside of our returns, we're going to add 2 divs. The first div is going to be our container. So it's good to have a container because the container is going to control the overall components. In this case, we're just going to name that container. Not very important. We're rarely going to touch that. The second one, this is going to be our background, right? So we just say BG for background. And in this case, we're just going to leave it white, but just give an example of what it does. When we hit Control Save for background black, you should just be able to change the entire background of our components. In this case, it's not showing up because we actually have to import this onto our index file. In order to do that, we open up our directory here. We go down to where it says pages and where it says index.tsx. We have to import that inside of our main folder here. So we're going to go ahead and say, open up, and then we're going to say hero, and then we're going to be prompted with this @ components. We just press that, and it should import that on top of our import section. And now we just simply close out of that, and we should now be able to be prompted here with our background. So let's make sure. Let's see, make sure that it's working. We say hello. Okay, so once we import some stuff within the background, you could see that it's actually working. So now we can just close out of our index because now it's going to be displaying exactly what we're trying to do. So, but again, like I said, we're just going to simply leave this white. So we're going to say background white. So that's not too important. But now we're just going to be left with a hello. But again, that's not very important. So what we're going to do now is that we want to make sure that this background is big and it's going to be centered because this is going to be the hero page. So to do that, we're now going to add, let's say your company. So in this case, we're going to say SaaS app, just like that. And so you can see it updates very, very quickly. SaaS app. Move that a little bit back here. And we want to make sure that we import this towards the center. So we're inside of our H1, we're going to open up a new div. Again, it's always good to separate each div. And we're going to enclose that inside of that. We're going to give this a class name. And we want everything here to be centered. So we're going to say text dash center, just like that. And we want the text. In this case, we're going to go below to our H1 tag, and we're going to say, we're going to give the text a size of 5XL, just like that. We're going to give it a font of bold. There we go. So once we control save, it gives a nice bold folder file. And then afterwards, we go back up to our previous one where it says text center. And we want to make sure that this item is also centered towards the horizontal axis. So in order to do that, we might have to give this a max width right here. So let's add a border of 2. So you can see right now our border isn't centered. So we're going to give this a max height. I'm sorry, we're going to give this a width of full and a height of full as well. So, I'm sorry, screen. So H screen, and I'm going to say max width of, let's say 1280 by pixels, and M auto, margin auto, just like that. So now we should see that this centers in the middle. If not, we can just go right here, copy that over onto our container tab, just like that. Okay. And so now you can see that it is centered. We're seeing that the entire thing is big, and it's got a max width of 1280, so it doesn't go above those borders. Okay. And then below that, we have our text centered. And again, we want everything to be, our items to be centered as well. So we're going to say items center, or in this case, justify center as well. So it's not being centered. Maybe because it's a little bit of a cheat code that I like to do. Sometimes the stuff doesn't work like this. It's just to add a margin top. We're going to give it a margin top of 20, just like that. So it's not necessarily up to the top of it. It'll just be off to where it's not touching. So that'll be kind of our hero text. And so anything we put inside of that will be below here. And so now we're just going to add an H3 tag, header 2, and this will be a description. In this case, we can just say lorem ipsum, say lorem, and then just hit, and it'll give you now a description. And again, we want to make sure that this is flex. No, not flex. I'm sorry. We want this to have a gap between the two. So we can say gap, I believe 4. We're going to give this a grid, just like that. So now, once we add that gap in the grid, you can see that it separates between the two of them. And we can even extend that grid up to 8. So that way it's not going above that. And then we're going to give our description a class. And we're going to say like, hey, this is going to have a max width of, we're going to give that of 500 pixels. And again, we give this an M auto, margin auto, to center that as well. Just like that. And then below our div, I'm sorry, below our H3 tags, we want to introduce a button tag, just like that. And we're going to say sign up. Just like that, sign up. And instead of our buttons, we're going to give that a class name. We're going to give that a border of 2. We're going to say border 2. We say rounded. Okay, so the only issue I guess we're seeing here is because it's inside of the div, so we want to delete that, and we actually want to go below this div pattern here. There we go. And so the problem that it was extending because we gave this a max width of 500, so, or I'm sorry, a max width of 1280. So essentially it was just stretching it out. So we can't have that. So we want to put that below this div of where the words are at. And so we say rounded XL. Let's say large actually, just a nice little center. And we're going to give this a padding of 4. So we say P4, just like that. And again, we can then add a background to it. And we're going to say of blue, see what that looks like. Background, let's say black. Okay, so in this case, we want to add a nice little color to our background. So let's open up a few color customization stuff here. So one of the pre-built background colors that Tailwind likes to offer is one known as slate. So we can just say slate, and then we'll give that a color of 400. So when we do that, you can see that gives like a nice little teal color, almost like a dark gray. But there's an endless amount of customization here. I'm opening up right here on our side. You can see there's a bunch of colors that Tailwind offers. Or we can even go with a sky blue actually. Sky, we could say sky. And we'll say that's 500 actually. So just like that. And that'll be our kind of our primary colors now that we're working with. So we'll just stick with sky. You can see that the sign up is black. I don't really like that. So we'll say text. We'll say white. Okay. So that way now it'll have like a nice little white text. And then we'll go ahead and remove our border just because we don't need that. And we can just give it like a nice little like effect. We'll make sure to add a drop shadow to that. So we just say shadow. And then we just simply go down where it says large, just like that. And so you can see now it gives it a nice little shadow that makes it very, very clean. In this instance, because the button, again, it's not centered, so we want to make sure I figured out how to center our button. We have to create another div within the button. And again, we have to make sure that the div encapsulates the entire button. So inside of that, we create a class name. We're going to say flex. We say justify center, just like that. So sometimes it can be a little tricky working with even with CSS. It's not necessarily coding, but again, it just happens. Okay. And we want to give this a margin top of around 4. That way it's away from our description as well. And that way we have enough space in between. So now when we actually expand this, you can see that it's wrong one. Now that when we expand it's going to remain in the center as well. So, and again, you can make this a little bit as bigger as you want. But for now, just for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to keep that just like that. And we're going to, yeah, just like that. So we just keep that just like that, like in the center, just to make things a little bit easier for us. And so now we move on to our navigation bar. Okay, so we can then go ahead and close out of this if you would like. Again, you can go ahead and customize this a little bit better, but we're just going to close out of that. We're going to go over to our components tab, and we're going to create a new one called NAVBAR.tsx, just like that. And let's go over to our hero tag. We're just going to copy this top part right here where it says export function and the return as well. And we paste that in here. We're going to change the hero over to NAVBAR. And then below that, we'll go ahead and close them just like that. Okay. And then just for the sake of making our lives easier, we're just going to add 2 divs within a div, just like that. Save that. And then before we make any changes, we'll make sure to go back over to our index folder. And on top of the hero section, we're actually going to import that navigation bar. So we say navbar. And then it's telling us, hey, it's missing, what's going on here? So we copy our hero section, we paste that, and we rename this one navbar. So we say navbar. Over here as well, we rename that into NAVBAR. We save that as well. So now it's no longer giving us that error, but nothing's there. That's because we haven't created anything at all. But of course, like the last time, if we write something, it'll show up. So you can see it shows up on our top corner right here. Okay. So for the next step of our process, we have to import our logo onto the navbar. I went ahead and found Commons, Wikimedia Commons, and I should just be able to copy this right here as a SVG. So let's hopefully, where it says copy image address, we should just be able to copy that and paste that on here. Fingers crossed. So it doesn't look like it's going to show up just like that. So let's go ahead and let's give this an image tag with a source. We'll assign that and we'll import these inside of our brackets here. We'll make sure to add an alt logo and it should show up here actually. Yep, there it is. Okay, awesome. It's a little big, so we'll make sure to have to adjust that. In order to do that, we just have to go down here, give this a class name, and where it says, yep, it gives us height 10, width 10, and that works just fine. So, and now it makes it a little bit smaller to where it works as a logo for our navigation bar. And again, if you want to give this a link as well, you can always just, I believe you should just be able to redirect this with a links. Okay, we'll worry about that later. But for now, that looks just about right. Above our div, actually, let's go ahead and let's give this a padding of 4. That way it's not on the, it's not hitting that top area. And in fact, since we're on the topic, let's go above this one right here. And we're going to give this a max width, just like we did to our last hero icons. We're going to give this a max width of 1280 pixels and an M auto. That way it's centered. That way, when we make this full size, it doesn't deviate from there, right? So you can see it stays within a certain frame right here. So a max width of 1080, but at all times it's also centered just like that. So that way it enacts like a real navigation bar, okay? If not, actually what I'll end up doing is copying this one. Let's move that down 1, just like that. And we'll actually add another div right here. We'll encapsulate that over into our existing image. Go below here, paste that, and we'll actually give this a padding of 4, just like that. We'll remove this one. And then we're going to make this one the first div, we're going to give that a background of slate, or I'm sorry, let's stick to the theme of sky blue. We'll say sky 500, okay? And then we'll make this our text white, which is going to be our logo. I believe we should just be able to do that. If not, no biggie. We'll just go back to our sky blue. Let's make this to like 200 maybe, see what that looks like. Or even 100, right? Typically you want to have some kind of contrast between your navigation bar and your logo, but because we're using the same similar colors to the logo, that's not going to work. It looks like over here we can do sky 900, so it's going to be like a darker blue. It might just give us enough of a contrast to where it's not clashing. But you know what? Let's not worry about the UX portion of it. All that matters is that it's going to be our navigation. So you can already see it's coming together quite nicely, if I'm honest. Maybe that's just me, right? I'm just hyping myself up here. But you can see it spans across the entire navigation. And that's exactly why I wanted to put this sky blue above the max width, because if we'd done that the other way, it would have cut off. But just like that, you know, we're able to already incorporate a nice little color that spans across the entire thing. And so now we have to add our navigation links. So that's going to be our dashboards, our, you know, whatever it is, our project count, you know, whatever it is that you want to add inside of your nav bar. And in order to do that, we're going to then go below this div right here. We're going to add a new div, of course, And then we're going to add our links inside of that. So we're going to say href. We're just going to say for now. There we go. So it looks like for the most part, Copilot knows exactly what we're doing. So once we say Control S, it's going to start adding the links. So what we're going to do is then just copy and paste this over a few times. And just because typically with the navbar, you have about 4 items inside of it, and we can just start to rename these. So we're going to have home, we're going to have our team, right? We're going to have our about section. And then the last one can be maybe like I'm trying to think, what else do you add inside of a dashboard? Just for the sake, because this is all I can think of, we're just going to say calendar. Again, not accurate to what you would use inside of a real navigation, but again, this is all filler stuff. So you go in there and you would just do this all by yourself. So it went ahead and actually already gave it side by side. So what we want to do is actually go back to our top navigation here. We're going to add a flex to that. Okay. So, or we can do a grid as well. Let's see what that looks like. Grid. We're going to say grid columns 2. So it gives us 2 columns for the most part. So you can see that, hey, and look, it's all separated between the 2 of us. But now I don't like the way that looks from the top. So we got to make sure that we say items are center. Yep, there we go. So we went ahead and on the overall top div below our background, we went ahead and added a grid columns of 2, and we centered the items. But obviously, if you're not blind, you can see that everything's kind of stuck together. So we're going to, again, just like we did previously, we're going to add a gap, and we're going to give that a gap of 8. I believe that should give us that. If not, I might have to say grid. No, okay. Flex. We might, okay, so if we add flex, maybe this might work. We should just be able to, there we go. Okay, so add a flex onto this div that encapsulates this entire thing, and then we can give that a gap to each individual item. Depending on how, again, far removed you want these to be, that's up to you. In this case, you know, I think that looks just about right. And then that should give us that overall, that navigation look to it. And then for the sake of this, we're just going to go ahead and also add a button on there as well. So we can just say, hey, button. And to make our life easier here, we're just going to go back to our hero tab, and we're going to copy this actually right here where it says button. We're going to paste that right here. When we paste that in there, you'd see that it is nowhere to be found. And that's because it is probably being hidden off to the corner. Yep, just like we suspected. But you can see it kind of messes with things a little bit, and that is probably because of a few things here. We probably need to remove a few of the things. If not, actually, let's go ahead and copy this. We'll delete that again. We'll post this underneath, and we're going to again give this, it should be a column of 3. So we'll change this to grid column 3, just like that. So now it's off to the corner rather than on the bottom. But we're going to give this a max width, right? So we go to the very end of it. We're going to say width of 10, or let's do 30. Okay, 20. It's all just one big way of figuring things out. So let's say 32. There we go. So we're going to give this a max width of 32 and a height, I believe, of 10. And then we're going to say items are going to be center, just like that. Text, center as well. It looks like it's struggling, so let's add a flex to that. And then we're going to then give this, or let's give this a 20, 21, okay. So I'm having a little issues here with the text. For some reason, it's telling me like, hey, Unless I say justify center. I know sometimes you have to do that. There we go. Okay, guys. So we gave this the button a width of 32 to make it wide, a height of 10 just to give it enough of width on top of it. We said item center, justify center, and the flex. That way it's going to be centered on top of the button. And again, regardless of its height or shape, it should just remain centered all throughout, okay? And then just like that, it'll remain. But if you're not blind, just like me, you're going to see that there is an issue going on here because now it's covering the item here. So that is important to note. And that's probably because we are... Sorry, I just got a spam call for some reason. What's going on here? Anyways, so that is probably because of our grid and our item center. So we want to make sure... Probably remove that actually. No, let's remain. Auto. Say justify center. No, we want to remove that as remain as well. Okay, so we'll go ahead and leave those in there. So typically the button, maybe just to balance this out, what we can do is just copy this as well. We're going to paste this below. That way we have two buttons. We're going to give this a div as well. Copy that, go underneath right here, paste that, and then we're going to say class name. We're going to give this a flex, just like that. And then one of them, we're going to remove the background as well. We're going to say login for this one. And then we're going to give these a gap really quickly of 4. And there we go. And so then we can also give this one a gap of, let's say, 3 or 4, just like that. So there we go. So you can see now, guys, very quickly, things are starting to actually come off very nicely. So we have our sign up, our login, we have our navigation bar. And then you can see that if you probably is not going to be mobile friendly. That is because we haven't done any changes to make this mobile friendly at all whatsoever. Once it gets below a certain resolution, you want to start changing this. So I guess we can do that very quickly. So what we can end up doing is saying, hey, once we get below a certain resolution, we have to delete them essentially. So in order to do that, we have to say hidden, right? You can see now our navigation is actually gone. But then we say, whereas we have flex, we're going to say large, just like that. So now, once we hit a certain resolution above, boom, they appear. Once we hit a certain resolution below, they disappear. And so same with the buttons, we want to do the same. So we'll go ahead and just copy, or I'm sorry, we'll just go ahead and say hidden as well, right here, and then say large. Flex. There we go. So again, we're inside of our mobile resolution, it's gone, but once you get it above it, it'll appear once again. And so that's how you get that mobile-esque resolution for that. And then of course we need to bring back some kind of navigation of sorts. So we'll go ahead and find the hamburger menu is what you call. So we need to go in there and add a hamburger menu of sorts. I know Tailwind actually has one built in. See if I can find that really quickly. Okay. All right, so it looks like I can't find one right now. I might have to do some Googling. So one of the many cheats I like to do is actually just go onto React icons, which what you have to do is that we have to close out of the server. So what that's going to end up doing is shutting off our server over here. So you'll see, hey, site can't be reached. It's okay, no worries. And then what we have to do is then install this thing called React Icons. You simply say npm install React Icons -- save. So we'll paste that over onto our dashboard. We'll go ahead and paste that in there. It'll start to download it. And once that finishes, it should be relatively quick. In the meantime, let's go over to our React Icons and just type in hamburger menu. Okay, so just say hamburger. It should show up relatively fast. Looks like my internet's kind of struggling here. I don't know why. This right here is actually what we're wanting. This little hamburger menu. Or we just say menu as well. So we just say menu. And so now you can see this one here. It says AI outline. All you have to do is literally just click on it. Boom, click on it, and it'll be copied onto your computer. And so then in the meantime, what we do is then we just space this on top. We say import. We'll open this up with a bracket, paste that in there, and then say from dash, and then it'll give us already an indication here, React Icons /AI, okay? And we just say save. And so notice where it says AI outline menu, and then back here where it says AI as well. Again, you only want to, whatever letter these two letters are is what you're going to import at the end of the React Icons, okay? And so now we should just be able to use this. So when we say AI, we just make sure to copy that. We go all the way down here and we just simply import that. So we open it up, we paste that in there, and we simply just close it. And so now when we do that, let's again start up our server. Refresh that. So as it's loading, it should show up. Boom, you can see we have a nice little hamburger menu. And let's change the color of that. So we'll again say class name, we'll say text, we'll just simply say white. And we'll make this a little bit bigger, similar to our logo. We'll just say height of 10 and our width of 10. Interesting. And so then we'll say items center, justify center, and then we'll say flex as well. There we go. And so now it should be centered as well. For some reason, it did not expand that. So we'll say again, height of 10, width of 10. It should have elongated it. There we go. So now you get a nice fat hamburger menu that we can utilize. We'll delete these ones up here. That was a total accident. But as you guys can see, we have an issue here because it's putting at the very end. So what we actually end up want to do, we'll go ahead and go up here where it says grid. We'll just say large as well. Let me see what that does. So what that ends up doing is saying, hey, look, we are not centered. But now we want to remove the grid, and we're going to simply say flex, and we're going to say justify and, or I'm sorry, justify between. Boom. And so now what that's doing is saying, hey, look, now we're going to be at the opposite ends at all times, right? As long as this is appearing. So if you go here, it'll be at the opposite ends, no matter how big or how small this is. And again, we don't want this to show up at any time other than our mobile. So we'll make sure to say flex, and then we'll say large hidden. Just like that. So now when we are working with our large, or I'm sorry, with our anything bigger, it'll disappear. But once you get below our certain resolution, it'll reappear. So this would be around tablet size, and smaller, this would be around desktop size, okay? And then you can see it's a little off to the right. So what I'll end up doing is just giving this a padding of right around 4, just like that. So it's not touching the wall off to the corner, and it's nice and aligned just like the way we have it over here with our icons. So, and for the most part, now we are going to have what's known as a hamburger menu. And now we can just get on to the next section. if you're wondering how to open and close this, that's going to require some JavaScript. I'll go ahead and paste that onto it, but that is going to require a little bit of some more work just because it needs to have a transition for that. So I'll go ahead and do that later. For now, we'll just go ahead and create we have our hero section here. And so now we want to create a description or some kind of image right here that displays exactly what our SaaS product does. And then we'll go ahead and import our footer. And then that way you guys can have a complete website that's fully functional. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. The next object we need to do is then create some kind of description showcasing what exactly is it that we do, and that is called the feature section, I believe. I think that's what we'll end up calling it, the feature section. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and do that. We'll open that. So we'll go ahead and go onto our components folder, make sure that's clicked, and we'll call this feature.tsx because we're working with TypeScript. And just like we did the last time, we're just simply going to copy this top area right here. We're going to paste that over and we're going to call this feature. And again, we want to make sure these are closed so we don't get any errors of sorts, and we'll simply paste that as well. We'll give 2 divs inside of a div, just like that. And then before we do anything, let's write a quick hello. That way, when we import it onto our index folder, it actually knows what we're talking about. And so this will go below our hero components, and we'll call this feature. We'll open up the feature. You can see it shows up. You just hit control, boom, it imports it down here. And now we just simply have to close that off, and then we just control save. And we should see our hello somewhere in here. Not interesting, is at the bottom. Oh, there it is. It's at the very, very bottom of our page. So we'll make sure to go ahead and fix that here in a sec. But more or less, that just tells you like, hey, our page is now working. It is now being picked up by NEXTJS, and it's going to display that onto the landing page, or our index page. So in order to go ahead and start adding a couple of things on here, we want to kind of do something similar to what we did with our hero page, and we want to start adding some. In this case, we're actually going to add a background, but before we do that, we're going to give this a class. We're going to say max width of, again, just like we did last time, 1280 actually, so 1280 pixels. We're going to give this a margin of auto, that way it's centered. And I'm actually thinking we're going to actually give this a background color, and we're going to say sky, and we're going to give this one a darker color, just like we did with our navbar. We're going to say 900, and we're going to add a border of 2. And then because it's not displaying, that's because we have nothing inside of it. So before we end up doing anything, we're just going to give this a height of screen, just like that. That's the very bottom actually, for some odd reason. So that shouldn't be doing that. I hope it's not because of our hero. I see it is because of our hero. So our hero is saying, hey, you have an H screen. So you have 2 screens that are consecutively showing up here. So let's actually go back to our hero section. We'll remove the H screen. And just for the sake of this, we're going to give this a padding bottom of 20, just like that. If not, let's say 40, just so we have an even top and even bottom, and then the next section starts to show up. So so again, our hero section, we're going to change that from H screen over to just padding bottom. This isn't proper, it's not the best way to do it, but for the sake of our time and time management, and for the sake of, again, pumping out landing pages. All right, it's not about being perfect, it's about simply getting it done. We're just going to simply work with that for now. Okay, and actually, same for now. Again, we'll leave that with H screen. We're probably going to do the same thing. We're going to probably change that and anyways, but I want to give this a rounded corners. So we're going to say rounded. We're just going to say large as well. And so when we make this a little bit bigger, you should be able to see that it's going to, I'm sorry, it's because I spelled that wrong. It's rounded. There we go. So you can see that the corners are a little bit rounded. I kind of want that to be a little bit more apparent. So we're going to say XL, maybe 2XL, maybe 3XL. There we go. That's exactly what I'm wanting. So you can see the corners now are going to be rounded, and that's going to give us a nice, beautiful look. And that's going to look more like a SaaS product rather than a kind of a website. And we're also going to go ahead and add a padding of 4. Boom. Let me paste that. It should. If not, okay, let's actually add our second div a padding. We're going to give that a padding of 4. I'm sorry, it's not a padding, it's a margin of 4. Okay, so again, there's a difference between the two. Oh, I'm getting an error here really quickly. Let me control back. Okay, let's again go back to our first one. We're going to give that a margin of 4. And so the reason it's very important to understand the difference between margin and padding is because it's very easy to get those two confused. And so you don't want to put yourself in a position to where it's you're messing up with the wrong thing. All right, padding is interior, margin tends to be outside of the box. Okay, so I'm getting a little bit of an error here. It's because it's telling us that, hey, you already have a margin auto here and you're trying to add another margin. So what I'm going to do just to fix this very quickly is add another div on top of that one. Again, this has to go over the entire thing. So just paste that underneath. We're going to give that a class name, and we're going to copy this right here, our max width auto, paste that. We're going to paste that onto the top one just like that. And it should fix our problem relatively easy while maintaining all of our components. So you can see at all times, we're going to have a nice little gap at the edge of the corners just to give it a nice little clean look to it. And now we should just be able to input all of our stuff inside of the box. And so now, yep, just like that, we want to add a header 1. And I don't necessarily have a description, so I'm just going to use some filler words in here. And I'm going to say something like, boost your productivity, start using our SaaS app today, or something like that, right? So you can see it's not centered, so we want to fix that really quickly. So on top of our existing H1, we're going to say text, center, boom. And we want to, again, give everything a padding so it's not hitting the corners. So we can see padding of 8. Actually, I kind of like that it's a little bit more centered rather than on the edges. And then inside of that, we want to make sure we give our text a color of white. And then inside of our H1, we want to make that text a little bit bigger. So we're going to say text, we're going to say 4XL, and then we're going to bold that. So we're going to say font bold. You can even say semi-bold. In this case, actually, I kind of want this to be a little bit more bolder. That makes sense, right? And then below that, our H1 tags, we're going to add a description of sorts. So we can say P, so for paragraph essentially. And yeah, you can see right here we are already getting a lorem ipsum of sorts. So again, we can just write that. And just similar to our last one, we're going to need a gap between the two. You know what, just to make this a quick fix, we're going to just add a padding top of 4. There we go. That way it's not hitting the top header, and you're still able to get enough space between, or you can always adjust this and make this a little bit more space between the two. I actually don't like how small that description looks, so we're just going to add a couple of these just like that. So you want to add usually more description when you want the description to be bigger in terms of how many words there are than the overall title of that area. So that way it's not going to make it overshadow. It's more of a UX kind of thing and more of a gravitating kind of concept. So again, just for the sake of keeping things a little bit more concise, I'm going to add a little bit more text there. So obviously that's not proper text. You want to go in there and fill that in with your own text of sorts, and yeah. Simple as that. And then usually in this area where you want to display your product, you want to have an image that's going to showcase what it is that your product does. So we're going to go ahead and find some kind of dashboard of sorts on the internet and see what we can find. So I went ahead and downloaded a dashboard off of Google. So it's already a pre-existing one. When it comes to these dashboards, it's always good to use something like Figma to design them, or once you have your product finished and coded, you want to make sure you have a copy of that on your computer. So for the sake of time, I just went ahead and used one off the internet. And I'm going to show you how you can actually take imported or downloaded images and save that straight onto your file. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. So we have to create a new, usually you want to do this inside of the source area, just so that way it's all consistent of where all your images and components and pages are all going to be inside of. So we're going to create a new folder, and in this one, in this folder, we're going to name this images. I'm sorry, I'm like twisting over my words here. And usually you want to separate your folders here, right? So you want to have one that says landing page, logos, all that. But for the sake of time, we're just going to simply import it inside of there, okay? So I should just be able to paste that, I believe. Okay, no. So since we created that folder inside of our directory, we can just go over to our page. So I did this inside of our coding. Saas app. And so inside of the source page, you can see right here we have our images. I'm going to paste our dashboard in here, and it should show up off to the right corner. Now you can see we have our dashboard. And so now in order to link that dashboard onto this specific section, what we need to do is first import a little known dependency, is that the word, from NEXTJS, and that is called import image from next-image. Secondly, what we need to do is then import our actual image. I named that dashboard, so what I'm going to do is open up this bracket, call this dashboard, and then from open this up, as images, I believe. Should just go to images dashboard. And I believe it was a PNG file, so you should just be able to paste that on there. And then once we get that finished, we should just go into our okay, so let's go in here. We'll create a new one called image, say source, and since we already have it imported on here, we're just going to import the dashboard as well, just like that. Dashboard, save that. It looks like it's not picking up. I'm not sure why. Maybe if we do the @ symbol, images dashboard. So we have our @images dashboard PNG. Maybe let's make this lowercase. Sometimes it can be a little finicky. So this is something that's very important. You want to make sure all of your letters cooperate with what you're trying to input on here. So let's make sure we have that. Okay. Unless we say source. So again, it's a little tricky sometimes. It's all about finding the right import / dashboard. Module cannot be found. Okay. I believe, okay, that's an issue there. 1 second. Okay, let's figure out what's going on here. This is troubleshooting at its finest, right? So dashboard.png, we found that. We imported dashboard.png off of the images folder. And in fact, let me actually go back to our index. Sometimes our index tells you exactly how it is exactly that they want you to import this. So I'm just gonna go ahead and actually copy this. Let's go into this section right here. And so it's telling us, hey, @components. So in this case, we're going to say @images. And we're going to then import our dashboard, just like that, .png. We need to rename this to dashboard. It's saying, hey, this is not accurate. Let's say photo. Maybe let's rename that to photo. Interesting. There we go. So it was something so dumb as removing the brackets. I know with Next.js 13, they made a few changes. Prior to this, you needed to add the brackets, but I guess they made it to where now that's not necessary. But it's okay. Now that we got that out of the way, we should be cooking here. So now that we have our dashboard, we can make all the changes necessary to adjust this. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this dashboard with a dividend, or I'm sorry, not dividend, divider. That's the word. I'm so used to finance talk over here. So the divider, and inside of that divider, we're going to add a few things such as a relative class. So let's go ahead and add this, and we're going to say relative. And then we're going to add a margin top of 16. So that way it's spaced off from the top. And then we're going to give this a overall height. So we're going to give this a height, image height of 80. And then for the large, we're actually going to make that the top isn't as high as it is as on the mobile. All right. So when we actually click on this, you can see that it'll actually end up fitting the entire thing. And then once it hits below a certain amount, it's not spaced off from the top. So also, I don't like the way that it is hitting the sides here. So let's make sure to give this also a padding of 4. There we go. Or even 8 actually. There we go. So it's not hitting the sides like that, even when it's full screen. And if we can, we're going to go into our image here. We're going to also give this a class name. We're going to give this a class name of absolute. You'll see what this is going to do. It's actually going to be pretty cool. We're going to say top 0. We're going to say left 0. We're going to say width. It's going to have a max width of 57 rem. We're then going to give this a max width of none. So just like that. And so you can see now it's going to give us this nice little cool little look to it. That thing's going to give it a little bit more depth. And then afterwards, we want to make sure that it's not sticking off to the sides. We're also going to give this a rounded look, kind of similar to what we did of 2XL, just like that. So similar to what we did with our corners over here. And then we're going to, and this actually should be, and then we're going to say, I believe, make sure that it's not sticking out to the corners like that. So we want to make sure that there is no overflow. So if I'm not mistaken, we had to add the overflow on top. Yeah, so at the very top of our dividend, we'll make sure to go and say overflow. We're going to say none. Okay, so we're just saying none. Overflow hidden, I believe. Actually, there we go. So now you can see that it's going to give us this nice little cool animation where it's kind of shifting off to the left, off to the right, and that's only going to happen with our small. But once it gets bigger, you can see that's going to adjust. And so we can actually make sure that doesn't happen once it gets to the large if you don't want it to. So we'll make sure like that stays like that. And then once it gets to the large, I believe it's right here. Just like that, stays to the center. So what we can end up doing is saying absolute, and then I believe, so maybe it's going to be a cop out here, but just for the sake of time, I'm just going to say hidden. Large is going to be hidden, just like that. And then I'm simply just going to paste this just like that. And then this is going to be a rounded. So we're just going to leave width top left, top 0. So we're just going to, sorry, hold up. So we're going to end up doing is leaving the rounded. So let's leave the rounded. We're going to say flex, just like that, flex. I'm sorry, large, going to flex, and then this is going to be hidden, meaning that when it's anything smaller, it'll be hidden. And then max width, no, that's fine. And then we're going to give this an absolute, remove the absolute, just like that. So now it should just be able to center it. If not, I can just give this in text center, I believe. And if not, a justify center, items center. So text center, justify center, item center. And then let me see you guys here. And then maybe like an M auto, margin auto as well. There we go. Okay. So it takes a little bit to get, make sure that this gets right here. For the sake of also making sure that this doesn't like have a max, I'm actually thinking we're going to give this a width of closer to 80 rem. Maybe even 70. 70 might be just, that might be a little too big here. That way when it's full screen, it'll kind of fill up the entire screen. And as you guys can see, as it gets smaller, boom. It does that little cropped out section, and it's, you're still having a nice little look to it overall. And it should work just fine here. So it's hidden, boom, hidden, and it takes us down to that. And overall, you can see that we have our dashboard off to the side here, and it looks just super nice. It looks super clean. And again, you can replace that with any of the images that you would like personally. Okay, and so now we can move on to the final section, and that is adding our footer. Footers are absolutely necessary to finish off the page. It gives it that consistency, and we'll do that right here. So again, just like our other components, we'll go ahead and add a new one. We'll say footer.tsx, just like that. Same process. Let's copy these two right here, go over to this right here, and we'll rename this to footer, just like that, footer. Close off this area. What's going on here? Okay, my keyboard's messing up. So, and then again, just for the sake of this, we're just going to add 2 divs. Makes it simple. And then we go over to our index page down here where it says feature. We just go in there, add the footer, and then boom, control. Looks like I messed up here. It's not adding the footer. Okay, so now it imported the footer. Again, guys, very important that you import that footer. Otherwise, there's going to be an error, but we control save. And then again, just so we can make sure, we say hello, boom, it's down here where you can barely even see it. But now we can begin to work on our footer section. That way we can finish off this beautiful Saas page, okay? And so in order to do that, we're going to, similar to the last one, we want to make sure we add a class name to the top one. We're going to, in this case, we want to give this one a background. And I want to give us the same background similar to both the NAVBAR and this little area right here. So we're going to say background. We're going to say sky. I believe it's 900 actually. And then for the sake of this, we're going to say on the second one, we're going to give this a max width. And we're going to again say 1280 pixels, a margin of auto, I'm messing up over here. Say margin of auto. And then we're going to have, just for now, we're going to give this an H1, and we're going to say hello. See what that looks like. Okay, cool. So if I click on this, you guys can see that the background expands all the way off to the corners, which is exactly what we want. Usually with a footer and the nav bar and a few other stuff in there, you want this to make sure that the color goes all the way through, but we don't want our words and any of the stuff that we put inside of that to expand past the 1280. So that's why we always put our background color first, and then we say our max width underneath that. So that way anything and all the contents inside of this never go above that and spill out. So now that we have that, we want to, I'm going to go ahead and actually give this a margin top of 4. Okay, never mind. So let's actually go back to our featured page. Let's make sure we give a little bit of spacing between the top and the bottom. So in order to do that, I'm just going to say margin 8. Yeah, that way we get a little bit more spacing. It doesn't look too crunched in my opinion, and it'll still give us that nice little look. Overall, that's what we're wanting. So again, it doesn't spill out there. So just like that. Okay, let's make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it very clearly. So now let's go down back to our footer. So we make sure Control S, save that. We go back. And now what we want to do, it's always good to import your logo. So we'll actually go back to the nav bar, and we'll go right here where it says our image. We'll make sure to copy that, go over in here, and we'll actually paste this. We'll replace that H1 tag. And as you can see, we have our logo inside of that. And then we want to add a div inside of our logo as well. Copy that and paste this below the logo div, and below this div right here where our logo sits in, again below that, we're going to add a new div, and we're going to add a couple of H1 tags in here. So we've already imported our logo. I think now what we're going to do is just start to add in our words. So best thing we can do is simply add some words saying like, we're going to have our, usually you want to import the navigation words. So you're going to have your home, your team, your about, your calendar. So if anything, what we can do is just simply copy this right here, actually, might as well. And we're just going to actually paste that in here. And you typically want this to have some kind of like, so what we're going to do is actually go up to our div right above our image. And we're going to actually give this a flex. And so what's going to end up doing is putting these side by side. You want the items to be centered. So say items center. There we go. So that way they're also parallel to the logo. And then now we're going to actually say justify between, or even just say justify around. So they're not all the way up to the corners. So you can do something like that where they're not hitting the edge of it all the way. So there's a few ways you can go about this. You can say justify between or justify around. I'm actually just might go justify between, and then obviously just give this a like padding of 4. There we go. That way, for one, it gives them more of a footer kind of look, but also it's so they're not off to the corners, like hitting them at the edge. And then if we actually go back to our links where we're going to have our nav links on there, we're going to then also give this a flex, or I'm sorry, a grid, I believe. There we go. And so typically you want these to actually be vertical rather than horizontally. That way it's more, I guess, in conjunction parallel to what you would see with a lot of other navigation bars as well. And so we're also going to give this a gap of, let's say 2. There we go. So they're a little bit more spread out. And then usually you want to have a few other services on top of that. So what we're going to also end up doing is just copying this right here And I believe this is right here. Yeah, so you copy that, you paste this. And yeah, you typically want to have like 2 of them. And this one, you usually want to have on top of your links. I've seen other examples to where people have stuff, something along the lines of like about, right? Or not so much about, you're going to have something along the lines of like a blog. Maybe you're going to have your privacy policy. You're going to have a contact section, right? Something like that I've seen. And maybe like your terms and service, so terms and agreements. So you just say terms, just like that. And so like, even when that looks a little bit bigger, you can see like it looks pretty clean. We can even like make this smaller so it's not off the corner like that. So we can even do is say like, give this, okay, hold up 1 second, guys. So it doesn't look too bad. What we could even do is actually add another thing about it. We can actually add let's add one more div in here. This will make sense in 1 second. But I was going to say, we can actually add our logos for our social media links. So if we actually go to React icons, let's go back to where we added our initial icons before, and let's add a few icons here. So let's go into let's add something like Twitter. Twitter could work actually. So we'll say this one here. I think that would work. We'll go again up above. We'll say import from, and then just simply paste that in there. That's actually not it. So let's go back up here, say import. Let's open this bracket up, paste that. Actually paste that right here. We'll paste that in there, just like that. From React icons, there we go. So we can import we're going to import a Twitter, just like that. Paste that. We'll close that off. And when we go back in here, you can see we have our Twitter icon. And let's actually give this a text of white. Yep, there we go. And I kind of want to make this a little bit bigger. So we're going to give these a width of, let's say 5. Or no, actually we're going to go within the class name and say width of 5. Height of 10, I believe. There we go. So that way they're a little bit bigger. And they're more in conjunction to what we're wanting them to have. So we're going to have our Twitter, let's say Facebook. I know sometimes people have Facebook accounts. Again, let's copy this. We're going to paste this a few times. Let's say 4 accounts. And again, let's copy this Facebook one real quick. Paste that in there. And we're going to change that to AI. And then we're going to say Instagram, right? So if you have Insta, we'll same with this one right here. We'll paste that in here. Also AI. And the reason, and the way I'm changing these letters right here is, again, you just look at the very first 2 letters of the ones I'm copying in, and it'll tell you. So if this one says BS, you just put in the BS down here. This one says AI, you put the AI back here. Let's do one more. So we have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We can do LinkedIn. Okay. So say linked. We just paste that, copy that as well. And again, we paste that and we say AI as well. So we'll go ahead and copy this one, go down, open that, boom, save. Same with this one, copy that, paste this down here, boom, saved. And then our very last one, which is the LinkedIn, copy that, go all the way down, paste that in there, boom, saved. So what I ended up doing was, again, adding the class name to every single one of them to make them just as big. And so now you can see we have our social media links. With this one, I actually don't want them to be horizontal. So we'll go ahead and add a flex. That way they're vertical to each other. And to me, that makes a little bit more sense. And then we'll add a gap of 2. So that way they're a little bit split off from each other. To me, that makes more sense. And so now when it's a little bit bigger, you can see it's a little bit more parallel to each other, just like that. Okay. And so typically with the privacy policy, once that is finished, for the most part, that is pretty much all you need. What I've also seen people do is that they'll go ahead and add like a, of course, like the very end of your your company, your LLC and stuff like that. So what I actually end up doing is I'm just going to copy this code over from what I see over here. And at the very end, I believe this flex item right here. So we're gonna go down here, paste that right here. And that's actually going to give us a border. And we're going to say this border is going to be white. And we're going to say the text is going to be white as well. And we're going to say that's 2023 as well. So typically there's also another thing I've seen that's also very common is that you want to add this border and then add like your company name and logo underneath, as well as if you're an LLC, all rights reserved, all that information down there. So I'm just going to paste that in there. I'll provide the code down in the description below. So you guys can copy this entire thing if you're wanting it for your personal projects as well. Something I'm going to change really quickly is I'm going to actually add a padding of 2. No, I'm sorry. Let's add a padding bottom of 2. There we go. So that way it's not off to like the very end of it. I like to give it a little bit of some spacing. I think everything with spacing looks so much better. And so for the most part, guys, we are pretty much just done. Like this is what your website is going to look like once it's all set in stone, right? So again, kind of a quick recap. We're going to have our NAVBAR, our quick login pages, which you can then go in there and code up the login page, go find some presets for that, our navigation. We're going to have our hero page. Typically you want to add maybe some context at the bottom of that. We're going to have the features page. So what exactly is the product you're selling? Usually after that, you maybe want to add some testimonials, whatever. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to keep this short. And then you have your footer, right? So it's not exactly perfect, but it gets you started where you want to be. And to me, this is exactly what it's all about, especially when you're bootstrapping a project. You don't want to get hung up on the perfections. You want to just get started and get going, right? And as you can see, we added a little bit of some mobile compatibility. So we made sure that even though it gets a little bit smaller, boom, it all adjusts to your screens and your sizes. And that'll go all the way through, right? So you can see it's still very nice and compact, compatible, and it adjusts all throughout. So before we finish this video off, guys, please be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, subscribe, comment down below if there's anything you guys want me to cover or go over next, any kind of tutorial. This is something I just did off the whim. I had none of this planned whatsoever. In fact, I had no idea what I was going to build by the time I hit the record button. So there's going to be a lot of mistakes here and there, but again, just for the sake of time, if you want to go, just go down below, check out the code in the description. And as always, I'll see you guys on the next one.